Maybe the thing that you think you're supposed to do isn't actually the thing that you should be doing.
Hello and welcome to Keeping It Real, the podcast where we talk to the most interesting people in real estate. But we have an exception today. Our guest is Dr. Ben Ritter, who is a leadership and career development coach from outside the real estate world. And I know Ben personally and have been really interested in a lot of the things that he's had to say. And so I invited him on the podcast to talk about career development, procrastination, making the most out of both your work-life balance and generally trying to figure out like when it's the right time to make changes. So, Ben, welcome.
Pumped to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm going to throw in another one, just living fearlessly, because I think
That's right.
We tend to forget that we tend to be the ones that hold ourselves back the most. So how do we lead ourselves towards our own goals, towards our, what we want for our career, from an emotional standpoint as well as a financial?
Well, first of all, Dr. Ben, what's your background?
Oh, where should we start? So I've been an entrepreneur pretty much my entire life. I had a pretty good role model in my dad, just of not being very well, being able to work well with authority.
Yeah.
So I say as a good role model, but it kind of inspired me to not really accept what people tend to think of as a normal job, that 9 to 5, sitting behind a desk. And so I had that kind of spark within me the entire time. Mm-hmm. So currently right now, though, I split my time as a leadership and career coach, as well as a senior talent management consultant. And that career pivot really happened when I was working in healthcare, probably about 8-9 years ago.
You have several degrees and you've done a lot of academic work. What sparked you to spend that much time in school? I couldn't wait to get away. That's maybe one of my questions here.
When people ask me if they should go back to school, I have to preface it with, I know I have a lot of letters after my name, but it's not the first thing I would suggest. So there's a story behind all of them. Like the doctorate, I wanted to pivot my career, and I had a couple different paths forward, from going to my current employer and doing this type of work, getting a new job in the field, or paving my own path forward so people would open the door and say hi when I showed up, and said I want to do leadership and organizational development.
Right.
So the knocking on the door and getting people to answer was the reason for the doctorate, as well as the general interest in education. The graduate school, the MBA and the MPH, that came up due to, again, the career space wasn't that great at the time, 2010-ish. The jobs that I had as an opportunity weren't really working out. Mm-hmm. And then because I went and knocked on some doors, I ended up getting a full ride pretty much into grad school.
Nice.
And that led me to pursue health policy, which was one of my career passions, as well as entrepreneurial management.
In the pregame here, while we were warming up, we were talking a lot about the coaching that real estate agents normally get, and it's a lot of call your leads, grind it out, that kind of thing. And I think that your perspective is probably going to be a lot different on people that might feel stuck in their career, or maybe it's someone that's watching this that's thinking about going into real estate and they've got a feeling, or someone that's in real estate and is trying to decide, because there's so much happening in the real estate world right now, do they want to stick around for that next evolution? And so maybe I'll start by just asking the question this way. The people that are coming to you, they're probably asking you specific questions, but what are they usually feeling?
Generally, they're stuck. Use that word. And what does stuck really mean? Stuck means that you're not sure what's going to happen next. You're kind of swimming in ambiguity, in the unknown. Yeah. And when you feel that in your career, when you don't have clarity, you generally have a hard time feeling confident, and you really don't know how to act. So you have no control over your life either. A lack of control leaves you feeling pretty lost. So people tend to feel like they're not really sure who they are. They don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it. It kind of raises the voice of the inner critic in your mind. So you start doubting yourself and everything you're doing. And so in general, it's, I don't know who I am. I don't know why I'm here. I don't feel confident, and I'm afraid. And I'm not sure really what I'm supposed to do, because the things that I'm doing don't really feel right to me. But they don't feel right because you haven't really spent time trying to figure out what they should be and where you should be spending your time.
What's the flip side? Because I like your living fearlessly. And so, obviously what you just outlined is the, sort of fear, uncertainty, and doubt of yourself, it sounds like. But what's the flip side? What's that living fearlessly look like?
The flip side of that is self-leadership, whereas I know who I am, I know what I'm working towards, I believe that I'm capable of handling anything that shows up, as well as I believe in my skills because I spent time actually learning them. And then because of that, I'm holding myself accountable each and every single day towards those things. So I'm showing up, I'm hanging out with certain people, I'm reading and spending my time on certain things, I'm making those calls to those leads. And if you're not holding yourself accountable to those things, people tend to procrastinate and push themselves away from it, then you're going to feel stuck, you're going to doubt yourself, etc. So self-leadership truly is the key to living fearlessly.
In your books and in some of your videos that I was checking out before our interview here, you talked about procrastination and like what that is. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, I mean, it hits each of those three pillars.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with control because I think we forget that specific piece a lot when it comes to procrastination. We think we have to do something, so then we feel bad about not doing it. Well, let's take a step back and say, maybe the thing that you think you're supposed to do isn't actually the thing that you should be doing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times people kind of get lost in the feelings of failure, and then they just blame themselves, and then it's a cycle. Because if you feel bad and then you blame yourself, then you feel bad more, and then you blame yourself, and then you're still not doing the thing because you actually haven't spent the time figuring out why you're not doing it or what it means to you and how to actually do it. So if you take a step back and you go, okay, this is a thing that I actually want to spend time on. Let's say, because you've looked at it and you're like, yes, this is the thing I'm supposed to be doing. Well, then you have to give yourself like an understanding of why. Why is this thing important to me? And you figure out why that is. And then you have to ask yourself, well, then how do I actually work towards it? And then you can stop if that's enough. But a lot of times what happens is how you're supposed to work on it ends up hitting like a roadblock. To you don't believe in yourself enough, or you don't have the skills, or you haven't built an environment that allows you to do that thing. So we can like pick, like what's something that people tend to procrastinate on in your field?
Right. Well, okay. So it could be as simple as calling your leads.
Yeah.
You know, all right, so maybe we start there, right?
Let's talk about it. So this is pretty simple.
Right.
I mean, I've actually worked with some people in the real estate industry.
Yep.
And sometimes there is an issue with that person believing that calling their leads is going to make a difference. And so you have to take a step back and go, does this person believe that calling their leads is going to lead to the outcome that they want?
Right.
And what's the outcome that people want usually when they call leads?
Close deals.
Close deals. So does this person believe, based on experience or based on who's around them, that calling their leads is going to close deals? From your experience, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I would hope that they have a pretty visceral understanding that one leads to the other. But
You can't just send a mailer or put up something on Instagram or...
I think that sometimes people wish that the leads would call them,
you
know, or that they're going to close themselves.
Yeah, my friends know that I'm here. They're going to call me.
Right. Exactly. Something like that.
So you have to work through that because I think those are actual beliefs that people have. And then you show them the data and the research and you show them what's working. And you're like, no. Calling leads. Actually, like if that's all you did, calling leads is the thing that's going to help you become successful and close deals. And so then great. Okay, so now let's say that person believes that. Okay, awesome. How are they supposed to call leads? Where are they getting that information from? Do they feel comfortable picking up the phone and actually, do they have a script? Do they know what they're going to say? So then you start breaking that down and say, well, what are the tools? How can you feel more confident in what you're doing?
Right.
And that's if the person doesn't already feel confident, which if you're not calling your leads, you probably don't believe in yourself and also probably don't think that you have the skills to be able to do the thing. So it's not like, hey, go call leads, go do this. It doesn't happen overnight. This is a process.
Right. And that almost sounds like it could be a virtuous cycle in either way. Like the more you do it, the better you get at it, the more you feel like you're good at it versus the more you procrastinate, the more it's just going to, you know, keep terrorizing, like self-terrorization.
Yeah. Well, if I don't do it, then I can never prove to myself that I'm not good at it.
Right.
And if I don't have that experience, then I can never feel bad about myself, actually. Instead, I can just believe that calling leads isn't the way to be successful.
Right.
So let's say now, like, you've done the work, you believe in yourself, you've studied a couple things, which, by the way, we all can do. I can open up a podcast, I can open up YouTube, I can go through training, videos, whatever it is. I can talk to a friend that is successful and figure out what those things are. Then I have to say, okay, so maybe I understand it's important and I have the skills, but I'm still not doing it. Generally, what's happening is we have too many barriers in front of us to calling those leads. Don't have access to numbers. Maybe we don't have a phone. Is that a thing anymore?
Yeah, no.
But some people may say, oh, I'm not in a quiet enough place to make calls.
Right.
So I push it off. And then I'm going to do it later. I have an hour of quiet time. I'm going to do it then.
Right.
But then that hour never comes. So they push that off. So then you have to then now figure out, how am I going to control my environment? So maybe I do it right when I wake up. Is that a good time to call? But then they might be thinking, well, people aren't going to pick up their phone then. So like every action has some sort of limiting belief potentially attached to it, but you have to talk yourself out of it and convince yourself, how are you going to do this thing until you find something that works for you?
It's interesting. So out there in podcast time, there's another podcast you should go check out on Keeping It Real, where we interviewed Amin, who's in his second year of real estate and absolutely killing it. Here in real world time, we interviewed him this morning. And a lot of what we're talking about is like eerily similar. You know, he's like, I believe that I need to call my leads, and I have this visceral experience where if I don't call my leads for a couple of days, then it starts to feel like I don't have any hot leads. And so he's sort of like self-Pavlovian trained himself to like doing it, I guess.
Into this, you have to build in that you're going to improve. That's part of the confidence piece. And maybe that's even part of the clarity piece. So when you're defining your goals with leads, and so let's take a step back and go to because the 3 C's of self-leadership: clarity, confidence, and control. We've talked about all of them kind of in a roundabout way.
Yep.
But going back to clarity, what are your values? Like, why are you doing this professionally? And you have to understand, like, oh, it's to be like, I want X, Y, Z in my life. Great. Okay. So what goals attached to that? And maybe a goal is, I need to call, or let's say I need to close how many deals in a quarter, whatever that number is. Throw out a number.
Right. 20.
20. Great. Based on my experience, how many leads do I need to call to close 20 deals in that quarter? And you get that number. And now all of a sudden you have a goal and something to work towards. And then you break that down to a daily task.
Right.
And so now I have more control over the thing I have to do. I believe I can do it. I know why I'm doing it. And I built an environment that allows me to do it. And this is the same, like, literal structure you can use for anything in your life that you find yourself stuck in, especially your career.
I want to pivot a little bit, because one of the things I read in your book that hit home for me, and then Amin was saying it this morning, was feeling like your schedule was running you, not like you running your schedule. And you had some good tips on dealing with this.
When it comes to our schedule, who books your meetings? Who accepts the meetings that you receive? You do, 100%. And so when you're looking at your calendar right now, if you don't feel in control, then you have given your power away and forgotten that you are specifically the one responsible for your calendar. Right. Now you have goals, and so maybe you think you need to accept certain meetings to reach those goals, but then maybe you need to readjust how you actually want to schedule your day and your week and your month, etc. So right now, let's say that you have a to-do list that is overwhelming. You have a calendar that you look at, you just want to close, and you feel like your work is running you. It's time to recalibrate. It's time to actually revisit what work is supposed to look like for you. And often we don't do that. We wake up, we say yes to the meetings that we receive. We think that this is what we have to do. And we like basically are getting pulled forwards by all the commitments that we supposedly have when it comes to work. And so literally just maybe take a day off of work, cut all the chains around you and say, what is like my ideal situation right now, realistically, based on what's happening with work? Mm-hmm. And then start rebuilding. Half of Monday, maybe I don't want to take meetings. Half of Fridays, I want to take meetings. I know I'm going to work Saturdays, so in the morning, I'm going to make sure I hit the gym before I actually have to go do X, Y, Z. And so build your ideal calendar and then structure the way that you book meetings based on that. It sounds so simple, but it is. And if you have a to-do list that is consistently getting overwhelming, generally what I like to do is you pick the most important thing for that day. That's the thing you do. And everything else, like maybe you pick 1 or 2 things, everything else you throw away. And if it comes back up in the next week or so, then you can start adding things back. But generally what happens is we have just said yes to everything. We've forgotten our boundaries. And we have no idea what an ideal workday is. And so we have to sit down and actually start building that out.
Awesome. There's probably another layer on here of delegation, like in handling that whole side of it. Yeah. Like you don't have to do everything, and I think that's something in the real estate world, one of the cool things about agents is they very readily adopt VAs. But I think a lot of agents, I've sat next to agents of ours that are just absolute powerhouses, but they put the whole world on their back, right? And there's a lot of like probably little tasks that maybe they should be delegating that they're not, right? So that they're not maybe using they're not using their prime talents for like the important things in the day, right? They're using it on like subtasks. Maybe you can tell us what's really going on here.
Well, there's probably a bunch of stuff
Yeah.
going on, but let's just again take a step back and say, like, what do you want your work to be like?
Yeah.
And that also means, what are your responsibilities? And I think as we become more successful, the things that that make the most use of our time tend to change, and we tend to forget that. So as maybe someone becomes more successful in their job, they still think they have to do all the things they were doing to make themselves successful. That's not the case. You've hired people for that now. And so you need to go through your tasks that you're doing and say, is this the best use of my time? But even before that, define what the best use of your time is. So what are your strengths? And how do you, what tasks relate to those strengths? And that might be what brings you the most money at the time. And then what are the things that are really not that valuable use of your time that you should start delegating but still feel responsible for? So basically you're going through this task list and ranking them and like writing your name next to some, and maybe writing like least, like not as urgent, not as important, not a big use of my time, whatever it is. You're kind of creating this map, then saying, great, now I have all these things that still need to get done, but they don't relate to my strengths. How do I get them done? And so now we can start restructuring how we're showing up to our day and day. And maybe it's also like, hey, this doesn't fit into my week and the calendar that I just built. This thing that I thought was important, where I have to react to this client or this specific ask, isn't that important. Let's move it out another week, or a week after that, or a week after that. And what tends to happen is we get all the things that we think we need to do, and then we try to figure out how to do them today. Instead say, these are the hours I have today. This is the most important thing that if I do, I'll feel successful and part of my ideal career and my vision. And everything else, what's the second most important thing? Let's slot that in. What's the third most important thing? Let's slot that in. I still want to work out. I still want to hang out with a friend. I still want to listen to this podcast. Great. Everything else gets moved to the next day. And that's not generally how people are managing their calendars or their to-do lists.
You said something in there that made me think of another question, and it was like, basically, what actually is happiness at work? Because we were talking about doing the to-do lists, getting everything done. Maybe that's closed deals. And I think a lot of people equate just like, oh, well, if I do all these things, then I'll have money and then I'll be happy. It's that like the meme, closed deals, ... be happy.
Yeah, that's
right?
it. That's all you have to do.
That's all you have to do.
Yeah.
Right. But it can't be that simple, right? Otherwise everyone would be happy at work, right?
Generally, job satisfaction is three different things. It's the actual work that we do. So you have to get some fulfillment from the work that you're doing. Maybe it's challenging in some way, it's novel, it's leveraging some skills that you have, it's allowing you to feel like you're applying some aspect of yourself to the world, maybe even learning. The second piece are the social relationships that you have. So if you're working with people you don't like, or with clients that you don't like, and you don't have any sort of like velvet rope policy for the people you work with, you're probably going to be pretty frustrated and stressed out, no matter how many deals you close. Especially if you feel like you're doing someone a favor at work, or that's a big thing when it comes to, I think, this industry. The third piece is meaning. So what are the things you're actually working towards and for? And as you show up, are you showing up in a way that's authentic to who you personally are? Are you lying? Are you being dishonest? Do you feel pressured to do things that you don't actually want to do professionally? Those three things tend to lead to the kind of this bucket of happiness.
So this sort of leads me back to almost the beginning question of how do you guide someone through a moment of career change? Where they're having that, like maybe they're not happy, they're trying to figure out like stay or go. What do those conversations usually look like?
Well, the biggest belief that we just need to dismantle for a second is that you're going to know before you do it.
Okay.
It's generally not the case.
Interesting.
Clarity can come from reflection, and there's some things we can do, things we want to look at. We'll talk about that in a second. But the majority of clarity comes from action. It comes from saying, I have this idea. Now I need to go explore this idea to figure out if it's right for me. So if someone is even thinking about going into this field, you shouldn't just make that decision and go into it and invest a bunch of money. You should go find people that are in the field. You should shadow them. You should ask them questions. You should try it on.
Right.
You go to the store, you try a shirt on if you don't like it,
Right.
And too often we overinvest. And you can even say the same thing for if you're in a field right now and you're curious about something else, what are you doing right now to go explore that field yourself? And so there's the reflection piece, which I think I still want to talk about. But when it comes to actually creating clarity for yourself, You need to try it on. The other piece is you don't generally think something is good for you until you're good at it. And so part of this is also understanding like you're not going to feel right doing something if you don't feel like you're actually doing good within it. And that's where that big confidence piece comes in, which is like, do you believe you're capable of it? Awesome, check. But then are you spending time learning the thing that you're going to now have to do? Because if you're picking up the phone every day and calling leads and none of them are converting, none of them are closing, and people are being rude to you, you're going to think, you're going to think you're in the wrong profession.
Yeah.
When you just didn't spend any time figuring out your script or learning from people that actually know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So then the reflection piece, people tend to get stuck in because they keep answering a lot of the same prompts, but written differently.
Okay.
Because they haven't figured out how to actually take action and explore. So generally, if you're trying to figure out what you want to do next or where you should apply your skills, you should take a look at what you have done. That's just a hint. Now, not where you've worked or the jobs you've had, but the skills and the things that you've been a part of. The other piece is like, what do you value? Like what fills you up from your experiences personally and professionally? When have you been the most excited, the happiest, the most in flow? And those are going to hint as well at themes and where you maybe should spend your time in the future. Also, the things you read about, the things you listen to, those hint at interests and passions as well. Like the thing you do doesn't have to be the thing that you're most passionate about or feel like it fulfills you the most initially, but it should be the thing that gets you excited a little bit, or you feel like it feels like you are applying certain skills that you have, even just a little bit in the beginning, but also it does bring a smile to your face. Like you're actively interested in learning more about it or doing it when you think about getting paid for something or maybe in your free time, maybe.
Yeah. I think this is going to resonate with a lot of our viewers because when I'm out there talking to them, I hear a lot of that something's not quite right in my current role, but I know that I'm good at, insert set of skills here. And I like real estate and I like the idea of helping people. And so can I use these skills to do this thing? And when we look at like our most successful customers, a lot of them are like, oh, they came from, literally several of them healthcare, or engineering or like obviously aspects of sales is big, but they're usually taking pieces of that prior lives and plugging it in with that next evolution of their career to figure out something that works for them a lot better.
I mean, I was also a bartender for 10 years. Well, I was a door guy. It's kind of funny me as a door guy as a kid. I was bar back and then I was bartender. And there were aspects of like that career and lifestyle that I use each and every single day, from your presence to your attitude to how you connect with individuals to how you can identify what someone needs, how you're able to upsell in certain instances, and like there are things that I really liked about that, which sometimes people forget and they go and they maybe transition into a new career and they like let that stuff go. And it's like, no. How do you create that in the current position that you're in now and leverage that skill or that strength and that interest to help you be successful?
Okay, so before we get too far away from the delegation thing, let's circle back to that and maybe you can give us some tips for how to actually do it.
This isn't my frame. It's actually from a book called Fearless Conversations. It's called A Delegation Tree. Anyone can look it up. Mm-hmm. But often we have a hard time delegating because we don't know what to delegate.
Right.
And we talked already about how you need to figure out what your strengths are and where you should be spending your time. Only do that and then delegate everything else. But that might not be as simple for some people. So I would recommend thinking about your tasks and your work like a tree. And stay with me.
Okay.
So a tree has roots, it has a trunk, it has branches, it has thinner branches, and it has leaves. So we think about delegating work. A lot of times people are afraid of, well, if I delegate this and it doesn't work out, we're going to fail. I'm going to look bad. Something's going to happen, like something drastic in terms of my financial life, whatever it is. So if you think of your tasks as a tree, you can give leaves away, nothing's going to happen. Leaves fall off every season anyways. You can cut some branches off, thin ones especially. You can also cut some thicker ones off. Your tree will be fine. Actually, sometimes you want to do that to help the tree grow in certain areas. You generally don't want to hurt the trunk. And you 100% never want to touch the roots. And so if you actually spend about a week or 2 weeks, or maybe even go through your calendar, if you keep tasks on your calendar pretty well, and label everything as if this failed, what would happen in the business? What would happen to the team? How much effort would I have to do to fix this? And so you label things as leaves, things that don't matter. Branches, things that like probably don't matter that much. You maybe have to like do something about it. To bigger branches. To then trunk, we would be in trouble. Like we would never heal from this. And then to a root, which is this would kill us. This would destroy us. And then keep the roots. Keep most of the trunks, unless you really want to train someone maybe to take over your role, because then you would want to train people on the trunks, and then you can train them on the roots eventually. But then all the branches and the leaves, give those away. And you can change how you do the work with this. Like you might have to train someone initially and shadow them, but eventually give all of those away and only get like check in on progress, meaning someone should be updating you on what's happening. You shouldn't have to have any oversight. If you want to give some of the trunk stuff away, then just make sure that you build in some processes to create some oversight.
So if we apply this to an entrepreneur, what are some of the things that you might think are roots, trunks, big branches, small branches, leaves? So I'm thinking, in a real estate practice, obviously, bringing on new agents is a really easy way to expand your business because that's more people calling leads. That's probably a leaf, closing deals. Okay, those are branches. But then you get into the core of the business, like who specifically the business focuses on, or like the accounting and finance or marketing practices. Those kind of seem more like trunks and roots. When you think about like, pick an entrepreneur business that, is sort of like service based, how do you categorize these things?
It kind of also depends on like what your strength is too.
Yeah.
Like if you have like a 100% close rate, you probably should be on the phone with those deals.
That's right.
And so then maybe that for you like is a route until you can find someone to take that over. Now, some people tend to overestimate their value there. And so they think that they're the only person that can close deals when they just haven't maybe trained the right person or have an overstated value of themselves at times. But
that's right.
It is something that you can train. And so maybe you want to look into that if it's keeping you away from actually scaling your business and growing in a way that you want to. For a service-based business, though, a lot of the leaves you actually can start automating, which is pretty great about the day that we live in.
Yep.
So yeah, I would say if you're paying labor for some leaf stuff, I don't even know if that's where you should be spending your time right now, such as like outreach, right? Outreach or like validating cold leads at a time, depending on what services you use and the tools you use.
In the real estate world, that's like AI autoresponders, automations, ISAs, basically people who call your leads for you. Which I know we just sent mixed signal there, but yeah.
So it depends on like what stage you're at in your business.
Exactly.
And also if you're still learning, like if you are listening to this and you're like, I'm going to give everyone my leads, but you haven't called leads, like pick up the phone and call your leads.
Absolutely.
For a while.
Yeah.
So I would highly recommend not delegating something that you haven't done yourself first.
That's right.
So delegate like audio podcast, like podcast editing, you can delegate that out depending on if you have AI or if you have someone like doing everything from cover out to art to posting it online, that kind of stuff. When it comes from a client issue, like scheduling, you can usually automate that or delegate that out. When it comes to being on the phone with the client, generally, like for me personally, I'm the face of my business. And so I have not decided to automate that out, but I know a lot of coaches that have have delegated, and not automated, but delegated every other aspect other than the session itself with the individual. I also have coaches that have delegated even the sessions themselves because they want to scale. It's like depending on the goal of your business, you're going to have to think about what do I need to delegate.
No, and this makes a lot of sense. And so, I mean, we've talked to agents. Everyone can go back and watch Harris, who we did a couple of months ago, and he's the closer. Right? Like he loves the thrill of the chase and loves to do that. And so he designed his business so he could do that. We talked to DJ Paris a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about his brokerage bringing in a CEO, right? Because that's a little bit more of that trunk root system, but they know they need help there and are willing to bring in someone with that talent.
This episode of Keeping It Real is brought to you by Real Geeks. Real Geeks is the all-in-one real estate sales and marketing technology platform that is designed to make real estate professionals more efficient. New for 2024, Real Geeks has 4 packages. The base package, which is the same platform that everyone's used to, that starts at $299, as well as 3 packages that include leads. So if you're looking to upgrade your technology and get leads, we've got something for everyone. All of the packages include SEO Fast Track, which is Real Geeks' AI-enabled SEO tool, which builds out long-tail, programmatically driven AI content for your listing pages. The data coming off this has been great in terms of generating long-tail traffic for our customers. You want to check this out? Head over to realgeeks.com and tell them that you saw us on Keeping It Real.
Talk to us a little bit about managing change, right? It's like something everyone's always afraid of change, right? And that's happening a lot in the real estate space right now. You know, whether it's interest rates going up, going down, you know, what's the Fed going to do this year? But then the biggest one is the NAR settlement, which could profoundly impact the way that buyers agents work and the compensation that comes along with it. But I'm interested to get your perspective just on like dealing with that professional / emotional side of, you know, sort of the meteor looks like it's incoming, you know, is this doomsday, or, you know, what do I need to do to maximize this situation?
There are certain things you can control that align with how you want to show up in the world. My values, my goals, the skills I want to use. There's certain things I don't control, such as, let's say I'm working full-time somewhere and I get fired, but I 100% know how to find another job. I know how to create multiple streams of income. I know how to save, so I'm not too concerned or feel stressed during that time frame. So if you're worried about a change that's going to occur, throw out a change. We'll talk about it.
Okay, so here's a change that could be coming to the real estate industry. The amount of compensation that a buyer gets could go down substantially, right?
So compensation goes down that someone can get from a specific task.
Right.
Great. So what can you control in this situation? You can't control if compensation goes down. So if you're worried about what you're going to do financially, then you have to start looking potentially at other ways to earn some money. You have to look at, you know, if the process changes, the comp changes, then I imagine that how you're going to do that process will change. So maybe it actually takes less time, less energy. So how can you maybe do this thing with less time, less energy to then earn the exact same amount of money for the same level of time investment? Or maybe there's a different partnership you can create to potentially then, you know, lead to a higher rate of return during those actions. Or can you develop other skills so that you, with the free time that you might get now because you're not doing this other thing, you can now still still show up and do the work professionally that you want to do and earn another stream of income. And so it's just like, as something changes, as an input changes or whatever, you have to then say, well, how now do I respond to this input to equal the same output?
So, and for the record, it's like, I don't know if compensation is going to change that much, but, you know, throwing it out there as an example, it's striking me that a lot of what you're saying, I see in the top producers. And the aspect that I see is they're willful or intentional about their activities. It's like they say, I want this, so I'm going to do this, you know, or, hey, the compensation for this task declined, and so I'm going to make it more efficient. They're not, they don't have an attitude of life is happening to me. They have an attitude of I can control myself and the world around me. And so that they're going to continue to, you know, persevere. Exactly.
So going back to the self-leadership framework again. So this thing changed. Well, what's your vision still? Well, your vision is to earn X amount of money. Well, why? So go back to your values again. Great. What skills do you want to use to get there potentially? Okay. So now it's like, well, how do you then restructure your day, your week? And because basically what we're saying is compensation goes down, the process is going to have to change. Like, people aren't going to invest the same amount of time and energy into something to equal less money.
That's right.
So can you maybe figure out what that process might be for yourself? Can you already start putting less energy and time into this process where now you have more time to invest in something else? And now, do you believe that you're capable of doing that? Now, do you need to go learn a new skill potentially now because you want to create the same amount of income? And now, how are you changing your week and your day and your calendar, et cetera, to make sure that you're now able to pivot and take this over?
It's a more holistic take on something that we've talked about with other guests. Again, with DJ, we were talking about, you know, differentiate or die, right? Sort of the marketing side of this, saying like, okay, how do I, you know, prove to this particular audience that, you know, I am the best value for this, or that I can charge a premium when everyone else is lowering their rates, or, you know, one of these things. And you're kind of approaching it from the like even a broader spectrum of like what other aspects of my life and business can I control to get to that objective.
Like, for example, one of my number one values is health. It's what I care deeply about.
Yeah.
Mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, etc. Everything I do in my life relates to that number one value because it's the most important thing. If I have some aspect of that in my professional life, I'm going to be happy.
Talking about like health and fulfillment at work, I think I see a lot of anguish come from people comparing themselves to others. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about like how healthy that is versus maybe setting your own goals or just other tactics to, you know, maybe just not be quite so obsessed with, you know.
Yeah, there's kind of two sides to this, probably more, but two that I'm going to talk about. And
Yeah.
a lot of the clients that I work with, especially the like kind of younger executives,
Right.
have this issue. They have a huge inner critic. They doubt themselves, and then they're always going, "Well, this guy did this. You know, I saw this on Instagram or on LinkedIn." And then they start.
Do you think this is a generational thing? Like, were older generations not as self-critical or not as like, you know, I don't know, keeping up with the Joneses, you know, or is that like, you know, millennials and Gen Zs are just like got a double dose of it?
If you don't know something exists, it's very difficult to compare yourself to it.
Okay. Yeah.
So at this point in time, I think it might be a multi-generational thing.
Yep.
Because it's just new. Now, potentially, I don't know how this would differ per generation, but generally, if it's in front of you, you're going to care about it.
Yeah.
Unless you spent the time, like really, really spent the time learning not to care about it, which honestly, it's easier to not see it, to cut it out, than it is to learn how not to care about it. I mean, there's kind of a balance. You get to a healthy point where you're like, I'm confident with who I am. I know what I care about. I know what I'm working towards. And you're at that point, it's easier to see kind of people that are just like crushing it or that are posting their private jets and their cruise ships that they rented and saying how successful that they are. It's easier to deal with it then, but it's still difficult because you start wondering why you aren't that successful. So first suggestion would be to cut it out.
All right, so everyone delete Instagram.
Honestly, there are ways to make money, and I understand that's important for your business, but there are ways to decrease the amount of things that you look at on Instagram, at least, or TikTok, or whatever it is. But when it comes to like healthy comparison, I mean, there are studies after study that shows that if people are taken from a certain community and put in a like more a higher, like a more wealthy community, more well-to-do, they get exposed to that, then they realize it exists, they believe that it's possible, and they're more likely to strive for that or achieve that as they grow up. It's just so when professionally, if you don't know that something is possible, you don't know that you can achieve more than you think is that you can, and you're probably not going to strive for it. So there's a healthy dose of this exists, I believe I can get there, to just kind of reframe and redefine what you're working towards. But it has to be realistic. Like you have to feel that it's within your reach. The pain comes from, this is too far away, this is not something I can achieve, I'm not good enough, like that kind of cycle, to then it actually detracts from your ability to show up each and every single day. If you use comparison as a way to learn from what other people are doing and to give yourself hope, like to pave the path forwards, then it's healthy. Oftentimes we don't do that because comparison is framed in a negative light.
Yeah.
So if you're comparing yourself to others right now, instead of comparing yourself to from a missing perspective, look at them and say, what can I learn from this? How can I potentially adapt my goals right now to achieve more and to show up in a more successful way?
I really like this because I think this is something that I sort of intuitively figured out, but I usually frame it a little bit differently, which is like I'm looking for sort of inspirational people to be around as well as mentors. Mm-hmm. And if you can get into a team situation where there's someone that's operating at a higher level, like a substantially higher level than you, then you can spend a lot of time learning from them. You know, in athletic environments, it's very common to walk into a situation and be like, well, that guy has like a whole bunch of natural gifts and I'm never going to be able to, you know, achieve his level, but I can emulate the things that he does to try and get there. So yeah, I love that. I think everyone should take that advice of like, realistically comparing, and in a professional environment, it's a lot better than, sort of the personal social media, where people are a lot of times faking it anyway. So,
And it's a distraction.
right.
Yeah.
There was a great section of your book that talked about dealing with difficult conversations, in particular, like coaching conversations. So we talked a lot about delegation, right? And so delegation is the first step. Okay, so I'm giving someone else a task they're going to need to do, but then there's always okay, what happens if it doesn't go well? How do you have these conversations?
Yes. Difficult conversations are just conversations. So I think we get afraid of certain things like cold prospecting or having difficult conflict-filled conversations because we think that there's something unique.
Right.
A conversation is you just talking to somebody else who's listening. Maybe they're talking back to you.
Yeah.
When you're having a difficult conversation, I'm going to imagine it's because performance isn't where you want it to be. So you're going to give someone information that is potentially going to help them and help you, but you're probably afraid that that information is going to bother them or hurt them, or maybe you're going to do it wrong, and etc. So there's fears attached to the fact that you want to have this conversation with somebody. So let's take the fears out for a second and say that fear is attached to you maybe offending someone. Great. Okay. So don't say anything that's personal or offensive. Your fear is potentially that you're going to hurt the relationship. Well, trust the person, like value the fact that you are their leader or potentially in this situation, and that person is going to listen to you because they're your employee and they're interested in what you have to say. And then give yourself some faith to say, I'm trying to help this person. I'm trying to help them develop and become a better employee and grow in their career. So then again, take away that piece, which is I'm going to hurt them. They're going to think that I'm trying to harm them and they're going to not like me. So you've worked through some of those beliefs. Now you just use a framework and a tool. So anyone that's giving performance feedback can just follow a specific model called SBIC. It's situation, behavior, impact. Then we throw on a commitment to it. And basically what we're doing with this tool is we're making things specific. We're not personalizing them. And we're developmentally focused. We're future focused. No one should ever give feedback that is only based on the past. Like, hey, you messed up. Bye. Like what does that do? Well, you're telling them
Right.
that they messed up because you're trying to improve their work product in the future. So you need to be talking about future work products and things.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm. So the situation piece, which is, hey, like what's an example where we want to have a difficult conversation?
Let's say there's an agent that is, they're calling their leads enough, but they're not doing a good job, like sort of closing out the relationship by, getting enough reviews, back on Google or getting referrals from these people, so they're just sort of like, closing the transaction and walking off, right? And so you're trying to give them performance feedback on like, hey, this is really how, you want to not end things, but like sort of put a nice capstone on the transaction so that you can keep the business coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is something they probably regularly give feedback on.
Yeah.
Hey, I was just listening to your most recent calls, actually the one earlier this morning. And I noticed when you were getting off the phone, you actually you had a great kind of ending. You said, see you later, bye. But you were missing something. You missed actually, highlighting like your service and what you did really well and their experience and for them to leave a review. Which if they don't leave a review, then you're probably not you might not get as much inbound, or you actually won't get recognition for the hard work that you just did in this situation. This is really important. Or you already said why it's really important. This is really important because you might get some more inbound, and you'll get more recognition for the situation. I think it's gonna be really important for your career moving forwards. Is there anything that you can do differently? And that's it.
Yeah.
It wasn't negative. It was saying, this is the thing that happened. This is the behavior that I saw. This is the impact of that behavior. And this is what I really hope we can do next time. Or what do you think we can do next time to fix it?
Right. And you're immediately engaging them. So listening to you and putting myself in the mind of the person that is receiving that conversation, I'm thinking, okay, here's an identified thing, right? Like he doesn't seem upset with me. He's pointing out something that's very specific. And now I'm thinking about why I would want to do this going forward, right? And ending it with a question is sort of genius because then, You're making me do the thinking.
Yeah, you want to engage them. Generally, the issue is people don't engage, and they either wait too long to give the feedback, so that it doesn't even make sense anymore. The person gets defensive. At the same time, maybe they try to sandwich it, so they actually lose the feedback within like this positive, kind of negative, positive thing.
Yeah.
And then they also like just make it personal. Like, hey, you're not asking for reviews. Why are you still doing that, you idiot? Like, how does that help? And so we have to think of feedback as a tool to develop the people that are working for you or with you to help you achieve certain outcomes and for them to develop.
Ben, this has been awesome. Tell people where they can find you.
So in Austin, Texas, in this podcasting studio. Wait, okay.
In a more like internet focused sense.
Okay. So please connect with me on LinkedIn, Dr. Benjamin Ritter. I'm pretty much read and respond to everything that people send me, even sales messages, which I try to stay away from. But then also you can look up my work at liveforyourselfconsulting.com.
Excellent. Thanks so much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this. If you have questions, actually, we forgot something. I normally, at the end of each episode, ask the guest to ask the audience a question that they can answer in the comments. What do you think we should ask them?
Ooh. What do you want to hold yourself accountable to? How do you want to lead yourself moving forwards? And not this year or in the next month, but tomorrow. What do you want to hold yourself accountable to tomorrow?
Awesome. Everyone, down in the comment section. Let's hear it. Talk to you later.